Hi everyone, Simon here, doing another video in the Learning Lazarus series. Now, it's been about 5 months since I did one of these, and that's because I was working towards performance of John chapter 11, as you might have seen in the other videos. Um, I was working towards a performance at a certain event, so I was showing you my process up to that point. Now, it's 2025, 5 months after I did that performance, and it's February, and in March, I have the opportunity to perform it again at a Christian school teaching training event, and I'm doing a bunch of readings, and one of them is going to be the performance of John chapter 11, verses 1 to 45. So I wanted to do a little video about how or just what it's like to resurrect a story, appropriate for the Lazarus one, to resurrect a story that you've learnt a while back and you've sort of let let go. I'm not the sort of person that memorizes passages of scripture um, for a lifetime. I do some verses I know off the top of my head and I use for my own edification. Um, but if I'm learning it for a performance, I've usually got another performance down the track or something like that. And so I'm learning it for an event, and then I'm okay. I don't deliberately forget it, but I'm okay with not making sure it's fresh and ready. But then on occasion, someone says, "Oh, would you like to do a story?" And obviously, the one that comes to mind is the last one, the last big one that I learnt, and that's this. Now, since doing the Lazarus story, I have also been touring Australia reading in a dramatic, performative sort of way, but doing dramatic readings of the entire Gospel of John, which is a 3 hour reading, and it was amazing to do in a bunch of different cities in Australia. And when I got to that section in John 11, wow, was that so fresh because I had memorized it. It was really, I could look away from the page a lot more as I was reading. It was a great experience to have that deep in my heart for that reading. So I'm not completely unfamiliar with it. It's not like I haven't looked at that story since then, but I haven't performed it. I haven't made sure I've memorized it and have it ready for performance. So that's what I'm starting to do. So I thought I'd make a video just at the beginning of this, just to tell you what that's like. I sometimes use the analogy of the way memory works is literally the way the memory works is it developing new synapses in your brains, neural pathways between 2 points, and as the more you remember something, the stronger and stronger those pathways become. It's a bit like forging a path through the bush or through a scrub. These are maybe very Australian words, but through a forest that's really overgrown. And when you're starting to try to memorize something, it seems very difficult like that. It's just like there's a jungle, and you're just trying to get through, and you're hacking away at vines and chopping down branches and pushing down grass and everything like that to make a path. As the more and more you do walk along that path, you've created that path, go back and forward. As you memorize something, that path becomes a better path, just like it would making a path through a forest. And eventually, as you stomp through there, it becomes a dirt path, and it gets established. You've seen those in the if you've gone for walks in nature, paths that people have trod over and over again become sort of established paths. And then you keep walking on them, and eventually the council does something, and they put some gravel on it, or some stones, or some wooden planks, or something like that, and it becomes an even more established path. And at that point, if you left it, you could come back and that path would still be there. At the beginning, if you just hacked one way through, you walked through, then you left it and you came back in a month, it'd be overgrown again. But once the path is established, then you can leave it and come back and the path is still there. Now, our brains are a bit like that. Um, and it can sometimes be even greater than that, like a highway. You can develop a path. You go, this is a story, or this is a passage of scripture that I just know. I've worked hard and I've learnt it, and I've reminded myself it over and over and over again. And it's not just a little dirt path in the woods. It is a concrete highway in my brain, and you can leave that sucker for years and come back to it and it will still be there. Now, this path, because I did it, you saw the process. I went over it for a couple of months, and I have really, and that's all I did. So it wasn't a story that I've been telling for years. It's one that I learned over couple of months, and then so I reckon that path was a bit of a gravel path, right? I was fairly familiar with it by the end, and um, and then I've left it for 5 months. And so now there are weeds. There are weeds all the way through, but the path is still there. Now I'm saying this without actually testing myself. I just know that from experience of doing these, that I know that path is still there. And I've done a little bit of weeding. At least I've walked down the path a little bit by the fact that I've read it a few times in the last few months. But this will be the first time that I see how much I can remember. Okay. Now all I do have my script here, but I'll only use that um, if I need to know where like if I totally lose it and I go, oh, I don't even remember what's next, then I can go and check and prompt myself. That's fine to do as well. But I'm just going to try and tell the story as best as I can, and you'll see how much of that path is there. And I guess we can both discover how much work I've got to do over the next month before I perform it again. So here we go. I'll go through it. It's John 11 verses 1 to 45, and I can't even remember the first bit. No, I'll look. It's okay. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. Yep, no, I totally can't remember. He was from Bethany. Okay, this is some of the things that I'll remember again, is because I incorporated my body into it. Sometimes I'll remember the actions and that will prompt the words. Like we discussed that in a previous video. So he was from Bethany, in the hometown of Mary and Martha, uh, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one. I'm just going to glance. I think that's probably the best way to do it. But it's showing me that I've got a bit of work to do to get back to the words, and and then eventually that will prompt me. But one of the things that I know will be similar, because I can probably do how about I do this? This is probably where my brain's at with it. I'll just run through it in a sweeping motions, right? Because that's really important to me that I could tell the overview of the whole thing. Um, all right, so oh, I've just zoomed out somehow. There we go. Ooh, I've got a new watch that can control. There we go. Yeah. So uh, Lazarus is in the middle here, or over to this side, I remember, and he's sick. It's talked about Mary and Martha. They send a message to Jesus saying, "The one you love is sick." Now, over here, when Jesus heard this, he said, "This sickness will not end death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister Mary and Lazarus. And so and this is a pivotal part of the story, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 3 more days. And then I turn away, and then I come back and sort of the passage, sensing, the passage of time. And then he said to his disciples, what does he say? He said, uh, let's go back to Judea. The rabbi, they said, this is his disciples who I've placed over here. The rabbi said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and now we're going back. And Jesus reassures them by saying, while there's daylight, i.e., while he's still here, then you don't need to worry. I'm just skimming through, and then um, and and then he said, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep. I'm going there to wake him up." The disciples said, "Look, well, if he sleeps, he'll get better." Um, Now I said this because they thought he meant natural sleep, but um, yeah, Jesus was speaking of his death, but they thought he meant natural sleep. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake, I'm glad he was not. You weren't. I was not there, so that you may believe. Let us go to him. Thomas says, "Let us also go, so that we may die with him." Okay. On his arrival, Jesus found out that Lazarus, so Jesus travels from this side of the stage, on his arrival. Now, I don't have him going all the way to where Lazarus is because there's that meeting space where Mary and Martha come out. So on his arrival, so like on the outskirts of the town, he finds out that Lazarus has been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was less than, and so this affords me to, then I do this gesture to off to Jerusalem. Off, I point to the back there. I'm going to have forward towards in the audience is where the tomb is. To the back is where Jerusalem is. And this spot allows me to do that and also prompts me to say, now, Bethany was just 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews came from there to meet with Mary and Martha and to comfort them in their grief. But when Mary no, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she ran out to him and she said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother had not have died. Uh, and but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, what did he say? Um, he said to her, your brother will rise again, of course. Your brother will rise again. And she said, I know that he will rise again at the coming of at the last day, in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said, whoa, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will not die, will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? He said, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Son of God, the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world. Now, after she said this, she went back. And then she goes back and calls her sister Mary aside and says, Teacher is here and is asking for you. Now, when Mary heard this, she got up quickly and ran out to him. Now, Jesus had not, this is where it's established the distance here. Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. Now, when the Jews, now see how it's really helpful having places where you're thinking of stuff. So I've got here, this is their home, and where Mary and Martha are. Over there is where Jesus met. Behind is the Jews who had come from Jerusalem. So I can refer to those spots. The audience can imagine it as I'm pointing out these things in the space. And it's also helpful for me. Now, when the Jews who had been with Mary comforting her noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, thinking she was going to the tomb to mourn there. Now, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was, she and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus said, and that's it. There's no conversation. She just wails that. And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He said. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he, who opened the eyes of the blind man, have kept this man from dying? Now, when then they arrive at once more, Jesus, deeply moved, Jesus came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across its entrance. Take away the stone, he said. Now, this is one of the beauties here of power of not having the text, of memorizing. Why memorizing scripture is so powerful, because I have Jesus looking at that tomb like an enemy. The tomb represents death in this world, and that's why he's so grieved and so. That's why he wept and was so angry before, I believe, and many interpreters of this passage believe it's he's actually furious at the enemy of death and the grief that it causes and the wrongness of it. And so he's looking like he's picking a fight at the tomb, and I can do that. And he says, "Roll the stone away from the entrance." Now, so much harder to get that emotion when you're looking at the text. Roll the stone away. So the ability to get your eyes away from the text and look out, even if you're not looking at the audience in their face, you're looking at the tomb, his enemy, death. And so he says, "You roll the stone away." Uh, but Lord, Martha says, by this stage there is, like in the uh, King James version says, "Lord, he stinketh." I think, um, Lord, by this stage there is a bad odor. He's been in there for 4 days, and Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that you know that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" And so they took away the stone, and Jesus looked up and said, "There's another one." Jesus looked up and said, "Now, if you've got the text there, you can't look up. So, whereas you can when you're freed from the text because you've memorized it, looked up and said, Father, see, now I have it. Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of those standing there so that they may believe." When he had said this, he called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, and he was wrapped in cloth around his face, and he ran strips of linen, and Jesus said, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. So that's the story. Clearly, I've got lots to do to polish it up over the next month. Um, but the heart of the story is still there. The memory of what's happening, where I'm moving, is generally still there. The message, the point of the story is still deep in my heart, and so I look forward to refreshing this one, and yeah, and performing it in front of all these teachers in a month's time. So I probably won't get a video of it. Who knows? I'll ask if I can. But yes, so that's just a little insight into what it's like to go back to a story you haven't, or a passage of scripture that you haven't learnt or kept in your memory for months, um, and how it's like a path, and once those roads, and the great thing about going back to it after these many months is that will weed the path. It will reestablish it and it will put a new layer if I have to learn it again. So that will actually affirm it and strengthen that path even more. So that if I have to do it again in a year's time, that path will still be there. And if I started doing it over and over and over, then that path would become laid with concrete. But I expect this will just be a process of weeding, getting back to that gravel path, maybe, uh, you know, making a bit more steady and secure so I can walk on it and know I can get from the beginning to the end uh, without generally faltering too much, at least. But yeah, so that's my process. Hope you enjoyed watching that. Cheers.